So we are here in this first interview for the book Innovation and Collaboration in the Digital Era. And today in the first interview, we have Steven Hardman from the publishing house, DeGruyter. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Jara. Good morning.
Yeah, I would like to have this conversation. Like, you discuss how it's to write a book from the publisher perspective, and then we can replicate an answer from the author perspective when we are writing. So always the question is, how is the process to write a book from the Gruyter? Because it takes a long time. I remember from the first email we changed almost 2 years ago until now it's published. It takes time. So how do you explain this process?
Thank you, Jara. You're right, it takes time. And I think in some ways it sort of relates to the focus of your book in a way. It's to do with relationships with people. And with a book, I mean, sometimes an author comes to you, you don't know, but sometimes, you know, you're talking with people, you may be talking with them for 6 or 12 or 18 months, and they may have an idea for a book, but obviously they need to find the time to write the book. So it starts with conversations normally. The first formal step is to get a proposal from the author outlining what they want to do. But that, you know, there could be several weeks or months of conversation before that while the author is really getting in their mind the idea of what it is they want to do. And so with the proposal, and it's DeGruyter has a standard proposal form, but this is the same, I think, for all publishers. It asks a series of questions and obvious questions, but, you know, what is the book about? You know, it's a silly thing to say, but what is the book about? Who are you writing the book for? What's the market? What's the readership? And I think it's important to sort of focus on what's the core readership for the book. Are you writing a book for practitioners? Is it for academic researchers? Is it for students? So you need to make that clear. We need a description of the book. We know what it is, you know, what's motivating the author while you're writing it. An outline of the table of contents. And it's also important to get an idea about the competition, about the other books that may be out there, which will be competitors to your book. So from a marketing perspective, we can see how the book would be positioned, how it would be priced, for example. These are all important considerations. I mean, sometimes authors say there is no book out there like mine, which is probably unusual because there's, I forget the exact numbers now, but just in the UK, there are tens of thousands of books published every year. And I think it's something like about 4,000 business books. But for a new book, even if there's nothing directly competitive, I'm sure there are sort of related adjacent books. So it's important to be able to position the book in the market. So the proposal is really important. And then when we get that from the author, we send it out for review. And sometimes we ask for sample material, a draft chapter. And then once the proposal is reviewed, the feedback we get, we share that with the author, and that helps us reach a decision on the project, whether to proceed with it or not. Yeah,
I remember, like, we had several proposals going and back, and as well we organized a book breakfast with different target groups of the book to think how they will see the book. And as well, they were academics. They were writing books for, I don't know how many years and how many books they had. And everyone had a tip. I think it was very useful, and as well, very good feedback. And as well, how they will use the book. I think that was super important. And at the end, this book breakfast was so important. Like, I had these guidelines during the whole writing and all the time. Even the title, it was coming from the book breakfast. And I think it was very good. Like, you were there as well. And we were discussing, okay, if it is for the students from MBA, or they are for academics or for practitioners, or who is the reader there, and as well other potential readers, not only one. So it was super interesting when I remember I said, well, I want to transform the mindset, you know, of academics. So they said, then you have not to write an academic book. so you have to do it more business. But it took for me when I was writing to have this super easy to read, like everyone can read it and understand our innovation. But at the same time, I wanted to have this kind of deep thingy as well. Like maybe some academics, they will say, I didn't think about this. So it's some kind of extra deep from some of the more, we can say, practitioners or academic researchers, like they are doing research for innovation and collaboration for many years. So that's still, I was keeping this, okay, yes, but I have not to discriminate either one of my other target groups. I don't know how you see this, Steven.
I think it was very interesting. I remember the book breakfast very, very well. It was in a very nice hotel in Florence 2 years ago. We were there for the ISPIM conference. I think we were very lucky. I've been an editor and publisher for about 25 years or more, and it's the first time I've had a book breakfast. So I think it was a very, very good initiative. Having said that, I mean, I have done focus groups before, usually at it's almost always at conferences where you get an author together with a group of 4 or 5 people to discuss things in the way that we did at the book breakfast, although there was a bigger group, I think. But I think this is really helpful, that sort of, in a way, it's similar to the review process. It's the peer sort of feedback. And if you can discuss your ideas as you did at a very early stage, I think it helps an author develop their ideas. And it also gets people interested in the book as well. You know, you're starting to develop a network, and if people know that the book is being written, you know, you start this dialogue with them. So I think the book breakfast was extremely helpful for all sorts of reasons, and I think, as you said, it helps sort of clarify various things. But one of the important things was about the market, obviously, the reader, who you're aiming the book for. So I think it was a very valuable exercise.
Yeah, and as well, the other question is how you, Steven, are helping and guiding writers and authors, because I was feeling like it was my first book. I was completely lost how to start, and I was asking a lot of questions, and you were always there. So what is your role guiding the writers?
Well, I think from the publisher's perspective, from DeGruyter's perspective, there are 2 things. One is we have content editors who are assigned to each book that we publish. So I know you work with my colleague Maximilian, and the content editor is there to help the author in terms of the preparation of the manuscript and the submission of the manuscript. So for authors, and often with first-time authors, we get all sorts of questions from a technical perspective about how the manuscript should be presented, figures, referencing, things like that. I mean, in a way, it's fairly straightforward. You know, we want the manuscript in a Word document, and figures have to be saved separately. But there are all sorts of other questions come up. So on the one hand, my colleague Maximilian was there to advise you on these issues. And also, I was there to help you more in terms of the editorial, perhaps like the focus of the book. You know, more from a content perspective. You know, I think we discussed at different stages about including sort of interviews with people and cases and things like that, and how we would go about that. So I think, from my perspective as the commissioning acquisitions editor, I was involved more from the content development, if you like. And I think it depends on the type of book that you're writing. I mean, if an academic is writing a monograph, then they probably need less guidance. I mean, it's a more straightforward book in a way, and particularly for an experienced writer. But books for the practitioner market and student market, they probably do need more help, and particularly for first-time authors, it's something new. Yeah, people need help and guidance, and that's what the publisher is there for. Yeah.
From my perspective, I was feeling super, I think, surrounded. Like I was not alone, and always when I had questions, we had a call. Or you ask me a lot of questions like a coach, how you plan to do this? How do you plan to do this? And I think that was very helpful as well to have you in this journey. So do you have some best practices for authors how to write a book from your experience? Some kind of 3 or 5 points you will advise?
I think, as I've already said, I think the sort of the key point is to talk to a publisher early. We do sometimes get people contact us with a complete manuscript. They'll say, "Here's a manuscript. Are you interested?" And it's sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. And I think whatever happens is we have to review a proposal. And if somebody spent 18 months writing a manuscript and they give it to a publisher, and the publisher reviews it, and people come back and say, yes, but the author should do this, they should do that, we need a chapter on something else. And there could be a bit more work than they'd anticipated. And so sometimes I think from the author's perspective, there could be a lot more work. And also I think with the publisher and the reviewers that we bring in, we can help the author develop the book.
Yeah.
But if the book is more or less finished and handed over, and sometimes what happens is that an author will go to a publisher with a manuscript, and the publisher says no thanks for whatever reason, and they go to other publishers with the same manuscript, and so you're not quite sure what you're receiving. So I would always recommend that you talk to a publisher even before you've written the very first word. And the second really important thing, I think, is to focus on the core market, what the market is. Sometimes we have authors come to us and they want to write the book for everybody, from undergraduate students to researchers to practitioners to policymakers, to the general reader. And that might sound like an exaggeration, but it happens. We have people who are very ambitious, but I think it's almost impossible to write for that sort of audience, such a wide audience. You have to focus on what's the core readership. Is it a book for practitioners? Is it for students? Having said that, I'm pigeonholing things. I mean, sometimes, if books for MBA students and executive education students, practitioner books are used. That sort of market is not black and white. There is that sort of, very much a crossover there between the practitioner and executive education markets, master's markets. But you need to write for the core market. And in terms of writing, I would say try and write as clearly as you can, and obviously write in a style that's appropriate for the market. So if you're writing an academic book, for example, a monograph, it needs to be quite heavily referenced. A book for the practitioner market, yes, you want to include some pointers and some sources of information and a few references, but you don't want to see, 2 or 3 references every paragraph. So you have to think of the reader and write in a way that is appropriate for the market. And in terms of things not to do, this might sound a bit strange, but I would say avoid humor. I'm a great believer in humor, and I love humor, but I think it can work sometimes. But sometimes authors write things, which they think are humorous, but sometimes it could cause offence, and other times it could be misunderstood. I mean, if you're writing for an international market, like the ISPIM conference we attended recently, there are people from numerous countries there. If you're writing for an international market and readers aren't native speakers of your language, and you put something humorous, they may misunderstand it. And another thing also in terms of writing style, I would say avoid colloquialism. And I mean, an example of this recently, I had a manuscript from somebody, and there were quite a few colloquialisms in the manuscript, but one, the author was writing about something which had been happening for a long time. And he said, this was from the year dot. Now, if you're an English speaker, the year dot, it means, it's an expression people use that, this happened years ago, been going for a long time, it's happening for years. But if you're not a native English speaker and you read something saying the year dot, you may understand it or you may not. And there were quite a few examples of that in this particular book. I mean, if you're writing for a particular geographic market, I mean, if an author's writing a book primarily for the UK market, then okay, that's probably not too bad. But if you want to write for the international market, I think it's best to avoid colloquialisms and writing clear, accessible language as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as well, going back to the process of publishing a book, there is, after you submit the manuscript, there are a lot of reviews. So this as well is in a phase you review the manuscript, and then when it's finished the manuscript, you send to the operations, to the factory, we can say, and then we start another review process. So I don't know how many times I read the manuscript. So that was like endless. So why this is so important from a publisher perspective to review the manuscript? Like at the end, it's not, I think at the beginning it was as well a review from style guidelines, to have all the style correct. And then you have all the grammar, but you have as well the small things, reviews and reviews. So why is this so important from a publisher perspective?
I think what you're describing, there's two things, two processes. One is the content. So firstly, we review the proposal and some sample material to look at it to see, is the content right? Is this a subject people will be interested in? How is the author approaching this? The uses of cases, examples, interviews. It's developing the content. But then also is a review. I mean, it is a review. I was going to say we may call it something different, but when we get the manuscript, there are all sorts of checks that have to be made. I mean, one is, copy editing, for example. I mean, if a manuscript is going to be copy edited, it has to, that's quite a thorough check, and there almost invariably sort of queries come back from that. But also there can be a range of formatting issues and questions come up as well. If you're having for example, quotes or cases, or say cases, for example, in boxes and things like that. If it's to do with the structure of the text, really, and if you have a particular structure within the manuscript, be it cases and examples or quotes, that needs to be consistent. Each chapter needs to sort of have that sort of structure to it. So I guess, to answer the question, the first review process is more the content, and the second one is more structural, from a structural perspective, to make sure everything flows cleanly and is professionally produced as possible.
So if someone wants to write a book, with whom they have to contact from DeGruyter?
Well, if they want to write a business book, they can contact me.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. No, I think if you're writing a book, and I think you talk to as I've said before, talk to the publisher early and do your research as well. I think it's important to find out that the publisher that will hopefully publish your book is active in your market. It might sound an obvious and a silly thing to say, but I think you need to look at the market, the audience, the subject you're writing for. Is it on innovation or entrepreneurship or another topic? Is the book for practitioners or students? And look at the publishers who are in that market. Look at the ones who are active in that market. So it's a sort of two-way thing. The book has to be the author and the publisher. They have to be right for each other. But if anybody watching this is wants to write a business book or an economics book, management book, then if they're interested in DeGruyter, then I will be the person to talk to.
Yeah, thank you, Steven. Do you want to say something about the book Innovation and Collaboration in the Digital Era? Something you want to say? How would it work, or what do you like, or how?
I think basically, I think it's something which it's hard to say that sort of, there's no books are out there that do what you're doing. But having said that, I think it really is, it's a different approach. It's a fresh approach. It's something new. There are many, many books on innovation, and I've been publishing books on innovation management for more than 20 years. But I think that the whole aspect of collaboration, it's something people talk about, but but to actually sort of approach it in the way that you've done. And I think this comes across in the way you work with people, your business, the way you network with people, all of the the people you're in contact with. This is collaboration. So I think that the way that you interweave the two is very important. And the other aspect, which I think is extremely important, is your focus on emotional intelligence. And I think that's really important in all sorts of business and in life in general these days. And it's something sort of people struggle with, but I think emotional intelligence can really help in terms of forming these relationships, forming collaboration with people, understanding other people, understanding how you come across to people. I think that's a sort of really, as I say, when you bring these aspects together, I think it makes it a very strong and unique book.
Thank you, Steven. Thank you very much for this. So I think for me it was a pleasure to meet you and to work with you. And I think we will continue.
Thank you very much, Harry. Yes, and it was a pleasure likewise. I've enjoyed it very much indeed. So I hope we do continue. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Steven. Thank you for listening. We are preparing this series of interviews with every person involved in the book, Innovation and Collaboration in the Digital Era. So this was the first one, and we will continue every week with one interview. So you can pre-order now the book in our shop, in shop.collabwith.co/book-2, or go simply to Amazon. And the book is now in pre-order and it will be available, I think, mid-June. But if you pre-order now, you have all the canvases in PDF coming from the book in a very nice format like you can work with. So don't forget to pre-order the book and enjoy until the next interview. Bye.